皆さんまた来てくださってありがとうございます。今日はね、土曜日の今5時です。今日のビデオは、地獄のラップトップの実際ラップトップをリペアした直した修理屋さんがゲストに来ています。ということでジョン・ポール・マック・アイザックさんお願いします。どうぞ。
Alright, John Paul Mac Isaac, the infamous Delaware repair shop man, the one who came into contact with Hunter Biden's laptop. It's so great to meet you. I'm glad to have this conversation. I want to hear the story.
Wow, where do you want me to begin?
I'll tell you exactly where I want you to begin. I want you to begin in April of 2019 on a Friday night just before closing time.
Well, yeah, it was about 10 minutes before closing, and I was definitely thinking about getting out of work. I was not thinking about spending time or staying late with anybody. And then the countertop illuminated as the headlights of a car pulled up in front of the shop, and I kind of let out a sigh because I knew that my evening was going to be cut abruptly short, or any plans that I had for that evening. And then the client walked in the door with 3 liquid damage MacBook Pros. And I was able to check in one of them. The other one was a write-off. The other one I left with the customer so he could take it with him and do the recovery himself. When I saw the Beau Biden Foundation sticker and the customer informed me that he was Hunter Biden, I instantly thought that this was his deceased brother's laptop, and he wanted to get his memories off of it. So I decided that, you know what, I'm not going to close. I'm going to stay in the shop a little later. I'm going to work with him, see if I can help him out. And I felt bad for him.
So he walks in. Do you recognize him? I've read, by the way, John Paul, you're legally blind. I don't. When he walks in, at what point do you realize I'm dealing with Hunter Biden?
When I asked him his last name. So the check-in process, I asked the customer their first name, and then I asked the last name. And when he got to Hunter, I wrote down Hunter, and then he goes Biden, and kind of sarcastically, like I should have known who he was. And I realized, okay, kind of put 2 and 2 together, Beau Biden Foundation. You know what? I never really knew what he looked like. I never really cared. It was never in my inclination to pay attention to the Biden family or what they got up to. So I really didn't know who he was until he informed me of who he was.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I think for a lot of people, unless you're incredibly politically active or politically read in, Hunter Biden isn't an A-list celebrity. The last name Biden is recognizable. So at the point that you realize, oh, this is a Biden, as in a political family of Bidens, did you know Hunter Biden's story? Did you know about his troubles? Did you know about his drug abuse? Did you know anything at that point?
Not really. I mean, you hear stories about, the crazy Biden kids, but that's about it. I mean, I was living in Biden's hometown. The people that I hung out with went to school with Hunter and with other members of the family. So also I know several people that have been not paid by the Biden family for various work that's been done over the decades. So we kind of knew what the family was about. We know the political family. We also know that sometimes they get into trouble. Sometimes they have a hard time paying their bills.
So that's based upon being in the Biden hometown. Your depth of knowledge immediately is more than the casual news viewer, even maybe the well-read news viewer, because you're living in the town and there's reputations around the family. What was the state of Hunter Biden when he came in that night?
He was definitely feeling no pain. He was intoxicated. He had a little bit of a mobility issue. Speech was a little slurred. When I actually left the shop, probably about 45 minutes after he left the shop, I noticed his vehicle was still there. I just assumed that he was asleep and went off because he was. Yeah.
So, okay, he walks into the shop. It's 10 minutes before closing time on a Friday night. In your estimation, he's inebriated. He is entitled to his reputation, meaning he already assumes you should know who he is as well. And he lays 3 water-damaged laptops on your counter. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you do then. Do you decide to stay late? You said you wanted to help him out. Does he stay with you? What's the process at that point in time?
So I take a look at the first machine. It was a complete write-off. Apple solders the components to the logic board, so there's no way that I can recover data if I can't power on the machine. And the machine was just too far gone. So I just pushed that back to him. The second machine just had some inoperable keys. So I said, hey, look, here's a keyboard. You can use the keyboard to log in. That's when, unfortunately, he informed me of what his password was. And then
What was that?
Oh, I don't want to repeat that on the news.
It was something inappropriate?
It was very inappropriate.
Yeah.
So I gave him a keyboard so he could facilitate his own backup. Again, because I felt bad for this guy. I thought he was upset and he had been out on a bender because he was trying to reconcile with his dead brother's data that's on these computers. The third computer, there was a glimmer of life, but it would have required me to check it in so I could take it apart, disconnect some components to get the machine up and running. And I explained that process with him. I printed up an authorization allowing me to take custody of the machine. And I had him sign that document, review the document with him, and then he left. And then I took the machine into the back and I started working on it.
So, and for what it's worth for anybody watching that wants to know, by the way, his password, which is part of what is revealed in your book, references, I think, 2 separate sex acts at the same time in one password. And he shares that with you. And it's my understanding, then, so does he take the first 2 laptops with him when he leaves and leaves only one of the 3 with you in your custody?
Correct.
Okay, and so now you stay at the shop and you decide, I'm going to go ahead and start what? Start doing what to this computer?
Well, he hired me to do the data recovery. So I booted up the machine, got the machine to a point where I could start to do a recovery. And the condition of the machine didn't allow me to do what's called a forensic copy. I had to literally just drag and drop folders. So I dragged the most important folder, dragged and dropped it to the server, and I said that's good enough for tonight, and I left. I came back the next morning to discover that the machine had died during the process. I only was able to recover about 1/3 of the data. So I had to kind of go through and look at what I recovered, compared it to the original to see what made it over and what didn't. And that's when I realized that the person this is not his brother's laptop, and that the person that's starring in a lot of this homemade porn is actually the guy that dropped off the laptop.
Okay, so during the data recovery process, you begin to see what is on the files?
During the verification. So when I went to go and copy data and then the machine shut down, I don't know where it stopped. It didn't complete the copy, so I had to look at 2 lists of the data, and then where something didn't match up, I'd click on it and then drag it to the folder so that the 2 lists would match up. It's in that process of clicking on a file, looking at the thumbnail, previewing the image. That's when I realized there was a considerable amount of pornography on this computer.
Which I've heard you say, by the way, is par for the course in your business.
Yeah, it's an occupational hazard.
What, a lot of people have porn on their computer, and a lot of people seem to damage their computer, so you see what's on a lot of people's computers?
It depends. If I'm hired to recover data, or if somebody's having a problem with their data, then I'm going to have to look at the data to perform that. If somebody just needs the screen replaced on their laptop, there's absolutely no reason to look at a customer's data at that point. It's not the cause of the problem.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with you on that because I think I've never taken a device to a repair shop, so I can't speak from personal experience, but I guess I might assume there's some expectation of privacy. Should Hunter have assumed some expectation of privacy at this point when it's in your custody? Did you break any ethical guidelines or anything by looking at his data?
You know what? I don't think so. I know there's been a lot of people out there that question that. He wanted me to recover his data. When a customer requires a data recovery, it's usually for 2 things: movies and pictures. It's for the things that you can't replace. You can always write a paper again if it's a college paper. You can always re-download music that you've downloaded, or you can always anything that's you've downloaded, you can always replace. You can't go back in time and take a photograph or a movie. Once you lose that data, that's irreplaceable. So when people come in for data recovery, that's what they want. That's what's irreplaceable. So I have to go in and recover typically that type of data, pictures and video. And to make sure, I'm not going to drag and drop a folder and then call a customer and say, hey, it's done, come on in, give me your credit card. I'm going to make sure that I did the job correctly. And in that process, you have to verify the content that's on the computer. Whether it's just quickly looking at it in a list view, Or if it's a case of where there's a potential of data corruption, corruption manifests itself in video formats more than anything else because video is very intensive, audio is intensive. If there's corruption, it'll pop, it'll squeak, the video will get distorted. It'll manifest itself and you'll be able to see it. So when I opened up a video file that was rather large, that would have been a prime candidate for corruption if there was any corruption in the data transfer, that just so happened to be a homemade video of Hunter. So it's
Homemade video of Hunter doing what?
well, amazingly multiple illegal acts at the same time, but I don't want to go into detail.
Multiple illegal acts? Are you talking about?
Well, smoking crack and while engaged in sex trade. I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I'm not a lawman. I didn't.
So you're in your repair shop. This is the following day, I take it. You're starting to see what's on some of these files. You're seeing pornography. In your estimation, you're seeing illegal acts, drug use. What do you do next?
I do the job. I mean, his dad's not running for president. This is just a guy. He wanted me to recover the data. I saw a couple financial documents that raised some red flags, but again, it's none of my business and it's his gross stuff, and I'm charging him way too little to do what I was doing. So I just wanted to get the job over and done with. And it really wasn't until 2 weeks later when his dad announced his candidacy that I started to get a fear for, okay, I've seen some very embarrassing material on this laptop. I'm pretty sure nobody's going to want this embarrassing material out there or the knowledge of somebody that's seen it talking to anybody. So that's when I started to get more and more concerned for my personal safety because, and I think as we've all seen recently, the Secret Service is the Biden family fixer service. You know, they bailed out Hunter, whether it's pulling guns out of trash cans or it's waking him up when he's on a OD at a hotel, or using his dad's credit card. It's kind of, I expected the Secret Service to come into the shop to sweep that laptop under the carpet and take me along with them.
But you said that's after 2 weeks of having the laptop when his dad announces he's running for president. What happens in the interim? You've got the laptop for 2 weeks. Is the job done?
Yeah,
Do you try to get
I
it back
finished
to
the
Hunter?
job I called up Hunter, I believe it was the 16th, and or I think I called him up on the 15th and said, you need to go out to pick up a hard drive. He picked up a 2 terabyte, I believe it was a 2 terabyte Western Digital. I think it was from Best Buy. He dropped that off on the 16th. I told him he could come in the next day to pick everything up. I'd transfer the data from the store server to the external overnight. I came in the morning the next day. Transfer was complete. I called him. I sent him a Square, per his request, one of the Square online payment requests. Filled that out, sent that in an email. I think I called him again the following weekend or right before the end of the month. I always call customers at the end of the month to collect out of delinquent bills. And then I think I called him a couple more times over the next month after that. So just no response.
So you had multiple contacts with Hunter over the first couple of days of your introduction. You tell him, come back. This is going to take a couple of days. Then you tell him, bring me a new external hard drive. And am I reading the situation right? You have pulled his data onto one of your servers, a storage server that you own and maintain.
Specifically for backup, yep.
Specifically for backup. And then your plan is to then transfer the data onto an external hard drive that he purchases. And he does so. And he brings it to you?
Yep.
I say, now you've transferred the data onto his external hard drive. I assume at this point it's still on your server as well.
Correct.
And he sort of disappears on you. So he disappears and never comes for that external hard drive that now maintains the data?
So now I'm in possession of his laptop, a backup of his laptop's home folder on an external drive that he provided, and no sign of Hunter.
And the data as well on your own server.
Yeah.
And Hunter never comes back. Have you heard from Hunter since that day?
No, the closest I've heard to Hunter was on October 13th, so the day before the October 14th New York Post story. Hunter's lawyer calls me to see if I was still in possession of the laptop.
When is this?
This was October 13th
of
2020, so the day before the New York Post.
The day before the original New York Post story that was, of course, censored on social media and called Russian disinformation. You got a call from Hunter's attorney saying, do you in fact have the laptop?
Yep, he actually said, I think my client, Hunter, left the laptop with you sometime in 2017. Do you still have it? So I actually told him what the FBI told me to say. If the FBI told me that if anybody comes looking for the laptop, you're to stall them. If they come in, just say, hey, it's in an off-site location. Give me a day or two. I'll retrieve it and give you a ring, collect their information, pass that on to the FBI, and the FBI would return the laptop.
3 years later, you get a call from Hunter's attorney, not until the imminent drop of the New York Post story. All right, I want to rewind back, though, to the 3 years prior. I'm still focusing on this period in time where you have his physical property and his data. Did you speak to an attorney in this time about custody? At some point, I assume when a customer no-shows you, doesn't return your calls, doesn't come back for their property, what happens to their property? Does it become your property?
Well, on the document that Hunter signed, it clearly states at the bottom, after 90 days, the product becomes my property. At that point, I mean, there's what's the saying? It's there's no assumption of privacy when it comes to things that you abandon. So I knew that this laptop became my property, and by then, and this was what, mid-July, it became my property. I knew that I needed this thing out of my shop. By then I had, shortly thereafter it became my property, I took a look at some of the data because Burisma was in the news. I definitely saw some things that were a concern, an obscenely large amount of money being traded hands with Burisma in exchange for favors from the State Department and basically a pay-for-play scheme.
Yeah.
And I knew that between that and the embarrassing content that was on the laptop, I needed to get this to the authorities, if anything, for my protection, but if anything else, that this was possible evidence in an investigation that needed to be attended to.
And so what did you do? When is the first time you reached out to the authorities, and who was that?
So I was a little reluctant to approach the FBI in this neck of the woods. I think Roger Stone had his house raided at like the prior January, so I was really concerned, and I think we've all seen the Russia collusion for 3 years. So I was concerned that the FBI was weaponized, and I didn't trust anybody local. My father, who's a retired Air Force colonel of 31 years, lives out in New Mexico. So I had a conversation with him and said, I voiced my concerns, and I was like, I want to get this to the authorities. I want to get it to the FBI because I feel like this is the proper channel, but I need to do it in Albuquerque. I can't do it myself. I'm too afraid to do it myself. So I enlisted my father to do it for me. So he approached the Albuquerque field office for the FBI in early October of 2019, which turned out to be probably, as he described it, the most humiliating experience of his life.
Why is that?
Well, he's a 31-year colonel, and gave 31 years of his life to the defense of this country, and he walks into an office where the FBI agent basically tells him to lawyer up, get the hell out, and don't talk about this.
Really?
Yep. And my dad was sitting there with a hard drive, a copy of the drives, and paperwork saying, help protect my son. That's all my father wanted, was to make sure that his son had some level of protection.
This is the first attempt to reach out by either you or somebody on your behalf. You hadn't contacted your own attorney yet. You hadn't done anything. Your first move is to go to the FBI, but the FBI in Albuquerque through your father.
Yep.
And he's rebuffed.
And yeah.